Welcome to Crypto Characters. I'm your host, Jason Nagi, and with us today is Alex Blum, the CEO of Atomic Capital. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Jason, thank you for having me. This is great.
So, all right, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things. Atomic Capital. Why don't you tell everyone what Atomic Capital does?
So, Atomic Capital does a few things. One is provide software for the compliant sale of what we call digital securities, or often in common parlance referred to as security tokens. We also provide fundraising services underneath a broker-dealer as FINRA licensed professionals. And thirdly, we have a venture capital fund that's investing in digital securities in the space. And beyond that, just trying to be legitimate people that are getting shit done and not just talking about it. So, I think especially in the space, everything changes really quickly, and so, that's what we do today. There's so many opportunities and so much kind of greenfield that these are the kind of beachheads that we've established, but also opportunistic. We have a combination of financial professionals, lawyers, and technologists, software developers. So, in combination, we're pretty equipped to handle a lot of the industry.
I hope you keep your lawyers chained up.
We have to manage them pretty hard.
All right, so the name Atomic, it invokes atoms, I guess, right?
Yeah, or I was just in Pacific Island Nation, and it evoked other things that didn't have great connotations during the meeting. But
like Oppenheimer?
Exactly.
He's probably not a big guy over there, right?
He's not probably not the most popular. Or what's the I think when they did the first nuclear test, he said something like, I forget I'm like Shiva.
Yeah,
I am
Shiva, goddess of death, or something like that, right? He's a goddess.
I don't know.
I'm not really up on my deities.
On your Hindu deities? Or it's like, I am become death, or something like that. Something dark.
It's a creepy quote. It's a creepy quote. But it was very melodramatic, although he was creating the most powerful bomb on the planet, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it was dramatic at the time. But so to go back to your question about Atomic, it evokes atoms. When I was starting this company, the way I was thinking about it is the ability to fractionalize or, cut into the kind of constituting parts of a financial product. You can tokenize or fractionalize, whatever you want to call it, up to 18 decimal points on Bitcoin or Ethereum protocols. And so in my mind, it was, I was actually choosing between two names, Chameleon Capital and Atomic Capital. And the idea was this changeability and flexibility. Chameleon Capital had some, I think, negative connotations. It sounds like shifty, and so we didn't go with that one. We're trying not to be shifty, and I think everyone's looking for shifty, and so it's really important to, I think, have integrity both in the way you act and your brand. But the way I just see it is like these tiny little parts that then you can recombine and create new kinds of financial products, and sort of be, there's another company called Alchemist, but sort of do some like alchemy or chemistry to make new things out of what are these tiny constituting parts of financial products.
I think Atomic is a much better, invokes much more positive things, at least here, as opposed to Chameleon, right?
Yeah, maybe that'll be our Asian subsidiary, Chameleon Capital.
That's right. So now, you also, I noticed when you go on your website, you've got pictures of atoms. There's a helium atom. I forgot how all those things looked. I thought that was pretty cool. You've got is it the nuclei moving around in the stream?
The electrons.
The electrons, right.
So we don't know religion, we don't know science.
That's right.
You're just asking, we have, I think we've gone pretty hard on the science atomic theme. Also, our fund has, it's called Compound, so it's also a science-related thing. But we have our kind of three service lines that are named after different atomic elements, so oxygen, helium, and nitrogen. We also send out our newsletter every month, which is called Periodic News, which is a pun that I enjoy.
That's great. Do you have one of those really cool revised periodic tables? Have you seen those?
I've seen it for different industries or for all sorts of stuff. I think we actually have. There's some we have something like that up in the office, like a little printout, but I forget what it's for. But yeah, so and then we send out in our newsletter every issue. Instead of issue 1 is issue H, which is atomic with 1 electron, and then issue 2 is helium, which has 2 electrons. And so I think we just did issue beryllium or something like that. No, wow. I don't think anybody except me has noticed that thing.
Are you a science guy? Is that it?
No.
You know your periodic tables, apparently.
Just from this, I know up to the 7th element because we've sent out 7 newsletters.
So how'd you get here? Tell me about that. I mean, you're in the fintech world. You're in the broker dealer world. You've got footholds apparently in the natural elements of our planet, but it indicates to me some sort of larger educational background. So let's hear how you got here.
Well, so I grew up in Southern California, and my parents are both from...
I'm going to interrupt you for a little bit. What part?
Originally from Malibu, California.
Okay, all right.
But my parents are both loud, like Jewish New Yorkers from Queens, and so that, I think, just being around, my father worked at Merrill Lynch for many years. My mother also was operated a healthcare company for like home healthcare, so they're both kind of entrepreneurial. My father went on he has some other businesses now, but just being around especially like really, really loud, I'm just thinking about him hearing this later, like really loud father, who has a lot of personality, is a character in his own right, was definitely an education. From there I went to school in Boston for undergrad. After that I went to Tufts University, so from there I've done a bunch of like random stuff to answer your question. When I was in school, I wrote for a newspaper that was it's called the Boston Phoenix, which was like an alt newspaper. And I used to write like book reviews and music reviews, things
Careful,
like that.
you can't say alt anymore in front of things.
All right. It shut down also. But anyways, it was like a long-running kind of like the arts and cool newspaper in Boston. And I worked for Obama. When that's not great to talk about either, but I worked for Obama.
We can talk about anything on this podcast.
Okay.
I keep it clean because.
Well, let's get into your sexual proclivities then. If we can talk about anything.
Like I said, I keep it clean.
I can talk about anything. You can. Listen.
I won't do that because I want my kids to be able to listen to this. I don't want to have something that I do infrequently that my children can appreciate. So I can't even say the word DUM right now because we're trying to put a fence around bad words.
Really?
Yeah. Huh. I mean, the hope is like this, right? If they learn that there are some bad words that they shouldn't be saying, eventually that'll be fine. But, when they get to the really bad ones, when they get older, they'll at least be used to refraining from using the bad words.
Well, so I'm like screwing up this podcast for your family right now. I've already said shit, I think.
Well, it's okay. I'll bleep that out.
Just don't be like this, man.
So grew up in SoCal. You went over to Boston, and then how long
I did like
Boston
some random internships during undergrad. I was there for 4 years, and then the day after graduating, drove down to D.C. and was working for a U.S. congressman. Like 2 weeks into it, I was like, this is the worst. I didn't like it at all.
Did you not like the politics? Did you not like...
I didn't like the politics. I didn't like the specific politician. He was a Democratic congressman working during a Republican-controlled House. I think the whole system is deeply broken, and I wouldn't identify with either party, really. But basically, we're writing up bills in order for him to say that he had tried so he could get reelected and then maybe doing something later. And it was just like, we knew they had no chance of getting passed. And I was like, this is like, I'm already dead. I'm like 22 years old, going to office. And it was also in the summer in D.C., which is deadly humid, and I had to wear a suit. It was like miserable.
And I bet you didn't have like the cotton suits that are the only things that are bearable in that summer.
Yeah, I wasn't wearing seersucker.
Right. You had like a typical wool suit, so you're dying when you step out of your house until you get there.
Yeah, it was really awful. And so, like 2 weeks into that, I applied to the Peace Corps and just kind of wanted to be somewhere else and kind of roll the dice and just not be at the bottom. Like, I felt like when I was working for this congressman, I was at the bottom of the ladder. I didn't want to climb. And so, I studied like computer science and English undergrad, and so I thought I was going to go to the Peace Corps and write. I was like, I'm just going to go there and write a novel. I have all this time. Like, I guess there'll be some people to help, whatever.
That might be the only good thing Jimmy Carter ever did. So
was he?
I think I think he founded that.
No,
well, maybe there was Habitat for Humanity.
That could
be. Kennedy did the Peace Corps. Carter founded Habitat for Humanity. Okay, all right, there you go.
And so,
where'd you go in the Peace Corps? What country? What part of the world?
I was in Panama, rural Panama. I lived with an indigenous tribe in the territory. It's called Comarca Nobe Bule. It's the Nobe Bule tribe. It's close to Costa Rica, in the northern, west side of Panama.
Okay. How long were you there for?
So the Peace Corps is typically for 2 years and 3 months. The first 3 months are training, and then you're in this community wherever. So the first 3 months are like in Panama City, closer to regular resources, and everyone's together in your class, and then you pass through and get placed in some place. So it was just an indigenous tribe. They spoke, their primary language was not even Spanish, it was this indigenous language called Nobere, which actually is interesting. They have certain noises that aren't even made in Spanish or English, like glottal stops things in the back of your throat. So I always say Nobe because it sounds weird, but it's really pronounced like Nobe. It's like the actual name of the tribe.
Could you pronounce the sounds?
I mean, it's all like relative, but I try to learn.
Did they laugh at you when you spoke?
They laughed at pretty much everything I did.
What'd you do over there?
So the main thing I did was there was all these artisan, basically grandmothers that would make these bags out of flowers, and like there was a long stringy plant they called pita that you could kind of peel like celery and then turn it into a fiber and then weave bags out of it, and then use flower dyes to dye and make these cool, really like authentic indigenous designs. And they wanted to make that into a business, but they were like hours away from phone and internet service, hours away from a road, and then you had to take a bus ride that costs money to go to like a tourism area and then try to sell them like on the street there or whatever. So they had tons of these bags and tons of the ability to make really high quality bags that if you could sell them, like tourists would buy them, they're free to make. They're all natural fibers and stuff, and just time. And you could sell them for high quality ones, $50, $100.
Okay.
So I helped to basically organize that, and again, it's like without electricity, so you're like writing like things down on pieces of paper to keep track of who sold what and whose bag is who.
Sounds like they needed blockchain over there.
I think they just needed electricity first or phone service, but I think it's from doing that. I think we can talk about, but that's how I got to what we're doing now. So it's in a certain sense, yeah. But
let's go back. So you're there, right? And
so I've been set up consignment agreements. I work with a nonprofit medical group, setting up just translating from the indigenous language and Spanish into English for these doctors, and then I taught English, but it was very difficult. I don't know if I taught it or just spoke about English in front of crowds.
All right. Was it schools or was it anyone that wanted to learn English?
I taught a bit in, the community was like 500 people, but I taught a bit in the school and then had like an adults class. Mm-hmm. But it was more, I think it was like more like, hey, like come see the white guy. I was like, there's nothing to do there, and everyone's the same. I mean, there's just a few families basically that all are related essentially. There's only a few last names in the community, and so it's like literally it's like this experience of being a celebrity to 500 people. Like they watch you all day. You could just sit there and there's so little going on that it's like everything you're doing is being watched. So they all came, but I think it was more just to interact with me than like a hardcore desire to learn English when they were like illiterate in Spanish in their own language. It was not going to really happen.
Well, there's all these people that study indigenous tribes, and apparently we've learned a lot about prehistoric man from them, from an anthropological perspective. So that sounds pretty cool. How did they live? I mean, would they get up with the sunset? Were they hunter-gatherers? Were they more gatherers? Did they farm or did they not farm?
The one good thing about like living in the jungle is there's an abundance of at least food, and not necessarily like nutritionally complete, but there's food to eat. Mm-hmm. And so it grows like in a jungle. There's banana trees. There's a plant called pifa. It's spelled Pixbae. It's kind of a blend of like an acorn and a potato.
Okay.
You can boil them. And then there's a bunch of cacao like to make into chocolate that grew, coffee beans, but they had the yucca and then like a lot of beans and rice kind of stuff. Some of them had little side businesses where they would raise chickens and then sell the meat. But a lot of it was just like, the leaf roof huts. All the buildings, huts are on stilts. So once in a while it would flood, and so all the things are like 10 feet up in the air, basically.
Oh wow.
And I slept in a hammock, and I had a pet monkey.
You had a pet monkey?
Yeah.
What kind of monkey was it?
It was a capuchin monkey. So it was named Rocky. There was another person. It was a baby, and so it was like somebody else in the community had stolen it from the mother out of the jungle, and then was not feeding it well, like really malnourished, and I was like, your monkey's gonna die.
Right.
And they were like, oh, we're feeding it bananas. I was like, this isn't a cartoon, like it doesn't just eat bananas, so they gave it to me.
The monkey eat ate bananas? Really?
That's what they were feeding it.
Okay.
And they had it like on a little harness, which otherwise it would have run away. And then, so like if you give us $20, we'll give you the monkey. And I was like, okay. Like, and then but it seemed like a great idea, the worst idea. That was like, if do you want to buy a child for $20 and like a hairy child in the humidity of Panama. But took care of this monkey for a while.
What did you do with the monkey?
Well, we ate it at the end. It was great.
Wait, are you serious? You had a pet monkey and you ate
I
it?
gave it to somebody else in the community.
Okay, all right. Well, there's a story that somebody once told me, which is why I asked that. They had won a pig at a fair, right?
Mm.
And, you live with the pig, you raise it, you brush its hair every day.
Yeah.
You take care of it.
And they're smart, too.
Yeah, right. And he said, it was like a member of the family. I'm like, oh, okay, well, what happened to it? He said, oh, well, we ate it. I just stopped.
That's
I
messed
said,
up.
you ate it?
Yeah.
It was a member of your family and you ate it? And that was the answer, yeah. So that was you were bringing up that story. It was coming to mind.
Yeah.
Did you ever take it off the harness and let it go free into the jungle, or did you have to keep it there because
No,
it was
I used
adapted?
to. I didn't. We used to let it go, and then would come back at that point. It was so habituated.
Right.
So we slept next to each other in like a hammock every night. But it's like just I had food for it. I'm not sure it loved me. Just like my dog now.
Well, you're an animal lover. When did you come to New York?
I arrived here in December of. I've lived here some summers. In undergrad, I did internships. I worked for a nonprofit in Brooklyn that was called 826 NYC formerly, but it's on the outside it says Superhero Supply Company. It's like a tutoring and education center.
Okay.
And created a movie over the summer with like kids in the area, and then filmed it at the Brooklyn Film or Arts Center or whatever it's called.
The BAM, Brooklyn Academy of Music?
Yeah, that one.
I lived in Brooklyn for a while, so
Okay.
about probably 15 years.
And then a different summer, I got fired for an internship after 3 weeks working for a PR agency.
What's the story behind that one?
So I won't name names, but I found that all my friends were coming to New York after my freshman year of college. I was like, my parents like, you can go, but you have to have like an internship or do something legitimate. Like you can't just smoke weed. And so I went on Craigslist and found an internship that was paying with, let's call it Jane Plain Consulting.
Okay.
And this PR company. I reached out like, hey, I have one of my majors in English, like, would love to be working for you. And she goes, okay. We get on a call, and she's like, oh, like, we can have you in the office, and we're doing this, we're doing that. And she goes, great. And then we like set up a date for me to come to the office. And I show up, and it's like in Stuytown, and it's just this woman's apartment. And like it was
really legitimate.
And literally, she would work out of her. And she would work out of her bedroom, and I would work in the living room. And then she would send me emails of like what to do, and I'm like, just speak out loud. I can hear you. And then she wanted me to like. She was older, and so she wanted me to like cold call like magazines to pitch stories. I'm like, why don't we just send them an email? And she's like, oh, that's not the way it works. So
she could send you an email from the other room, but she couldn't email the magazines to pitch a story.
That's
really
exactly.
brilliant.
And then so I'd call the place and they'd be like, why don't you just send me an email? I'm like, I don't know. And so like I wasn't doing well. I'm not great at really working for anybody in general, and then even when it doesn't make sense, even more so. And so I was fired, but I was already checked out. I remember like one time she wanted me to like do research on some place where they were trying to get business, and I just like left. I just remember like spending so many hours there to just not have to go back to this place. And then I had like 2 months in New York to hang out. I took like a computer science class, and just smoked weed like I wanted to do and from the get-go.
Computer science and weed, it's like a great thing, right?
It seems to be for some.
All the kids are doing it. So when was that? What year was that?
I think it was 2006 or 2007.
Okay.
Or like the summer of 2007 it would be.
Okay, so, all right, now we're up to 2007.
Well,
You've done a ton of stuff, by the way, up until 2007. I mean,
well, the Peace Corps was
lifetime.
after college, so that was I graduated 2010, and then you asked me if I lived in New York, so I did some internships. I did the Peace Corps, and then I moved to New York in December 2017.
Gotcha.
But I spent some time here before.
So, what drew you to the fintech space to ultimately doing digital securities on an atomic level?
Most things I've done, like, so I didn't mention, like, so after the Peace Corps, I started a company setting up rural telecommunications networks where I lived in Panama and then in Mexico. And there was just, like, there was no phone service where I lived. It was freaking terrible. And, like, not just, like, I couldn't, like, watch Netflix. Like, the things I was trying to do is start this business, teach English start this business with these women, teach English, contact this nonprofit medical group. You can't. And I actually cut my arm. It doesn't look that bad now, but I had this giant, like, open wound, and it hit my artery and was, like, spewing out blood, and I had to, like, walk to the road and take a bus, and it was, like, really makes you feel how alone you are without communication services. So started coming afterwards, basically trying to set up rural, why was there no phone service in these places, and trying to figure that out, and then ended up, there was, like, a new generation of lower cost, lower energy telecom, like cell phone towers, essentially, or like the boxes.
The towers, right, yeah.
That, so instead of being like a normal a big like tower you see like on the side of a road costs like $500,000 to put up. These ones you could put up for $30,000 to $40,000 and could still propagate around the same network of a 5-kilometer radius. And so there's like a business case at that point for very poor people to provide them service, and spent a few years setting that up while going to grad school. And yeah, so that like kind of just really showed me, you know, how you could take this creativity of like wanting to write this novel that I wanted to join the Peace Corps for the get-go, right, and kind of write that creativity into the real world through entrepreneurship.
You may still be able to write that novel, given what I'm hearing so far.
I think, well, yeah, maybe autobiography or whatever. That seems so self-adoring, but I wrote half a novel. It's about it's called The Monk.
Okay.
And it's about somebody self-immolating piece by piece and burning it, like body off, and mailing it to a woman actually works as like a young, like successful person in New York City. And this is before I lived in New York.
That's creepy, man. I like it. You could be a good fiction writer.
Have you seen, like, you know that, it's on a Rage Against the Machine album, but it's also a very famous photo of a guy self-immolating?
Yeah, it's the monk that was protesting the Vietnam War in the 60s, right?
Yeah. Have you ever seen the video of it? It's like eerie how like the guy like burns alive and just sits still, right? And so like that that became like I don't know, still like really fascinates me. I'm obsessed with it. Like spiritually and psychologically, why one would do that, and how you could have the restraint or whatever the right word is, the enlightenment to experience, like, burn yourself alive and just stay there without screaming and just die, and like to believe in something that seems like a good idea, or maybe not a good idea but your only option. And then also in the photo, like, you're looking at, it's literally somebody turning directly into energy. And so usually when we die, our bodies like disintegrate underground, but this is like you're looking at someone who's half human, half pure energy, which is what we ultimately are. But to see it like directly, I know it's very hard for people to look at, but it's like the reason why is because there's something so powerful about it. And so I became obsessed with that, and then started writing this book about this woman who's like has this perfect life, and then like this guy starts mysteriously burning off his body piece by piece and putting the videos on YouTube, and it becomes this big phenomenon. And then he starts mailing her the ashes, and you don't know why, and it starts destroying her life starts falling apart basically as his body starts being burnt off.
Wow, man, that is intense.
So that's just a fun light summer read.
Right. I mean, I can't watch those videos where you're watching someone die.
I'm not watching them like all day long here, just to be clear.
I'm with you on it. Like there was, it's so easy to be disconnected, particularly by the way that people look at YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. Like there's a disconnectedness, I think, that stuff breeds. And, there are people that watch like the Daniel Pearl beheading. There's a lot of people that watch that.
So there's a Reddit channel called Watch People Die. I looked at one time, like when I was in high school. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
But it's like videos of people dying, like violent deaths or terrorism, things like this.
Yeah, I don't really ever want to see that.
It's a blast. No, I was really regretted I looked at it.
I mean, it's a terrible thing to watch someone die in front of you, and even though you're not physically there, I don't know that I would really be able to remove that. I
agree. I watched this video of this woman being stoned to death in like Africa. I still remember like it's like you can't get rid of it. Like I'm sorry that I looked at it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even to the point where, did you see that seven train shooting that happened 2 weeks ago?
No.
It's a terrifying video. It starts with two guys punching somebody, and the guy's fighting back, and all of a sudden, someone jumps back, and they pull out like it looks like a small gun from where their stomach is, and they shoot him 10 times. It's in broad daylight on the 7 train.
Yeah.
And it sounded like 10 times, and I was fairly upset because it was on Twitter. I didn't think that you were going to watch somebody die, but like, I mean, that person was shot in the head from a point blank range repeatedly, and they ultimately died, and so it used to be hard to find that stuff, but you could kind of, it was on a Twitter feed. Someone in the fintech world had tweeted it.
Yeah, and so why would you do that to someone else? Like,
yeah, it's a.
But I mean, at the same time, it's kind of like the same. Sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead. I jumped out of the frame. Do you want some water, by the way?
Could we get some of the sparkling situation going?
Yeah, sure, no problem. At my first podcast, I mistakenly was shilling for the corporate dime by allowing the names on these cans to be seen.
Oh, really?
So this time, I am
it's
not
still on the top
shilling
rim there,
for the corporate dime. Oh.
This is not Seagram's seltzer water.
It is not, and we are not endorsed by Seagram's.
Not yet.
We're not, no, exactly. But it is time for a word from our sponsor. Because this podcast is brought to you by Adams. That's correct. They're all around us. They're part of this guy's company. If it wasn't for Adams, we wouldn't be here. So thank you to Adams for sponsoring this podcast. They are a proud sponsor, and we are proud to have them.
And what do they pay, Adams? What for a sponsorship?
They pay us in life.
Yeah. Just everything.
That's right. They are the form to which we will become.
Beautiful. To you.
All right, so is this your third business now that you've had? Or your second?
Well, wait, what were we just talking about?
We were talking
more
about people
interesting than
dying
my
on
business.
YouTube, right.
I think the same way that, like, through, like, the printing press, like, changing social dynamics because of information being spread, this ability to see violence in that way so quickly and immediately also, I think, that's got to affect society. Like, we're just talking about it now, but, like, like the Vietnam War, like, this was the first war, I think, kind of, like, on TV, and, like, just, like, all that stuff's happening right now. We're, like, in this, like, city, wherever we are.
Somewhere deep in the heart.
Somewhere deep in the heart of New York. There's like there's monkeys probably being like tested on. There are like people that are sick and old and haven't left their house in years. There's like people with like terrible drug addictions like surrounding us, but we don't see it. And it's just amazing. In the same way, the immediacy of Twitter to kind of just bring some of this stuff to light. Like, I think it's one of the big issues technology can't really resolve is that I, as a human, like, if I see you suffering here, I'm going to respond to that very differently than knowing there's 1 billion people in Africa starving. Like, that doesn't compel me to do anything. It's just a number, right? But, like, something about seeing it, like, one thing to see it on Twitter, but then to see it live, like, it's just human, like, behavioral nature. And then I think you can talk about behavioral economics or whatever, but, like, I don't know. To be able to see it, it's, I think, changing society in a lot of ways.
It is, and no one really understands how just yet. That's why it's weird. If you were to go back and look at the effect that Facebook would have on society, I don't know that you would have.
Like, that sounds great.
I don't know that you would have thought about like children being depressed from it, which
right.
Apparently really happens. I mean, there's all sorts of weird things.
We're just like going through the subway, like I don't have to talk to a person ever again. It's great.
Aren't elevators the strangest places now?
Yeah.
Right?
It's like, then to say something, it's like, it's bizarre.
Yeah, they're like, oh wait, are you talking to me? You should be listening to a podcast or looking at your phone.
Just text me if you need me. As I say,
like your old boss.
And it's like I'm like losing my you lose your like social. Like I don't really know how to act on an elevator anymore. I remember a day when people talked on these things. Or I remember being in Boston like in undergrad and like you would talk to like strangers on the subway. And it's like now I'm like, I don't know. I think I've got too much to do. It's more interesting here, but I don't think we have to rant about phones. But just it definitely changes the dynamics about society. And I think what we've seen is as more information becomes available to the masses, that you lose centralized control. I'm seeing a segue here. And so like what happens is there are revolutions. Like there's a Russian Revolution, French Revolution. There's wars. There's the fall of like the Eastern Bloc of communism. Like all this stuff comes ultimately from information, which like in a certain sense, data, everything like this is information. You know what I mean? Like in a certain definitional sense. And so I don't know. That's what I think it leads to social discord and then a rebalancing or recalibrating.
Yeah, once we can figure it out, which kind of takes us to blockchain, right? Because blockchain is doing that on a whole different level.
Yeah.
I mean, it's doing it now. Your securities used to be a piece of paper, but you guys actually are one of the leaders in the digital
one of them,
securities.
not the.
There might be
Either
two
way.
or three others, but literally two or three others that are actually helping. You could name it on one hand, I would imagine maybe two, but that's it. Where you're taking the paper that you used to get, or really the paper that someone used to hold for you somewhere else when you would say you had stock, and you're turning it into bits and bytes, and it's going onto someone's phone if they want, or a wallet or something like that.
I mean, we're not mobile optimized yet, but yes.
Okay, so let's talk about that and kind of what you're doing and how you're innovating with digital securities.
Well, I think that ties back to what we were just talking about. I think all this stuff that seems super permanent, as though like we're like ahistorical in a certain sense, like we're at the end of history, is not the case. Like everything, these buildings, the way that laws function, even across different jurisdictions, it's all made up by people in rooms and then slowly refined or changed until it's forced to be changed in some way. And I think that a lot of what we're seeing with blockchain broadly and specifically in the space of digital securities is bringing to the consciousness this tension in society around, okay, like all these rules that seem super stable, wait, like I can actually just do this all myself and it's actually not that big of a deal in a certain sense. Like I can make up my own economics of the way that like incentives work. And literally, it starts to thin the lines between the authority of government and the contradictions and fragility of government against what are basically made up ideas, and the fact that like humans can now in their own power create money, create securities, and the only thing really in the way are laws that say if you do this without a permission, you go to jail. There's the sort of violence of authority of government in general, and I'm not like super anti-government. I'm just saying that's the ultimate authority of what a government is they can force you to go to jail, they can kill, they can use weapons. I mean, I always see like a government is just a business with weapons, essentially.
I agree with you, by the way.
Okay.
No, I do. It's funny. If you listen to Nick Szabo, you know who he is?
Yeah, he once retweeted one of my tweets. It was a busy day on Twitter.
And I think he liked a tweet that I had, and I was like, wow, he actually looked at that.
Yeah.
I forget what it was. It was recent, but he had tweeted something recently, like sometime in February, about the way that it was something related to smart contracts, and I was like, and it was about the amount of miners, and if the miners would decrease on Bitcoin, how it wouldn't affect Bitcoin. And I was like, that's a great point. I really never thought about it that way. So I said, from one of the masters of smart contracts, and I got a thumbs up from the man himself. Wow. It was a big day for me, man.
Good for you.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was listening to him talk, and his whole concept behind smart contracts was that the government enforces laws by violence. The only reason why I'm going to do anything is that you tell me to, is because if I don't, I'll get arrested, or you'll find me.
Yep.
Jordan Peterson talked about that. That was his entire purpose. His reason for saying, I'm not going to use your pronouns. You can't make me say those words, because he said if I do, this crazy law is going to, they said, well, nothing will happen. He said, no, there'll be a judgment against me, and if I don't pay that judgment, I will go to jail. And he's right. It's a libertarian perspective, not that he is or Nick Szabo is, which is that the only reason why we do things is because we have to. There's some sort of law, whether it's natural law,
or at least
right?
doing the things we don't want to do.
Exactly. Like pay someone. You don't want to pay someone, but if you don't, then the guy you owe money to or the girl you owe money to is going to come after you, right?
Yeah.
So smart contracts takes that away because there's no central government telling you what to do. The contract just executes based upon facts that have occurred, and it's a wonderful thing. particularly in the in the decentralized world, though it is, right? Because that's the one way that if you have a smart contract and the two parties that don't know each other, right? So I am Bitcoin address A and you're Bitcoin address B, right? You know what Bitcoin is, right? You heard of that thing?
Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Is that like Ethereum or something?
It's like this gold that they give. They have a special coin with a B and a dollar sign on it.
Sounds shady. I don't know.
So Bitcoin A and Bitcoin B, and you don't know who it is, but we both agree to have a bet. Let's say it's a basic thing, and we tie it up with a smart contract, and it's attached to our wallets because the smart contracts has the ability to enact the contract. And I don't know who you are, and you don't know who I am, or we're in two different countries.
Like I know you.
There's no law that's going to be able to stop that smart contract from. Nothing that a judge can say that smart contract is not enforceable. You have to chase the person down and find out who Bitcoin B is if you want to get your Bitcoin back because there was a flaw in the code or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
maybe. I mean, you're the coder, right? You're the computer science major. That's a theory. In theory,
I think and so I don't really come from like the ICO side, where I think a lot of good things came of that, and also things that are like the reasons why there are regulations, and the reason why like people will take advantage of other people if you don't. It's easy to talk over people's heads, and I think blockchain and the jargon of blockchain itself is really prone to. I can use a few words, decentralization and atomic swaps, and it's like, this guy's a genius. Like, let me give him a bunch of money. And so, to some degree, like, I think you can write beautiful white papers about, oh, if this thing worked out this way and this, then, like, in a perfect closed system, that would work out that way. I think in practice, to date, the complexity of enforcing anything of like high complexity with a smart contract is very hard to pull off. So like, same with token economics, all these like beautiful papers about how the way this math is going to work, and none of it freaking works at all. Like, and none of them really account for like multiple parties with different interests, that there's secondary markets that are just trading these like speculative objects, and so they don't do the things you want them to do. And so I think me and our company are really focused on like, okay, what shit's like actually, what can you actually do and what's real, which are still pretty basic things. And I think one of the challenges is that as you increase in complexity around what kind of agreement or automated sort of system of if and then functions cause some kind of thing to happen, you're forced to actually change your social relationship to people. So like, right now, I mean, really, like, you're a lawyer, so, like, you're writing out you're trying to think ahead of, like, if this happens, then this is the rule, and, like, if here's the arbitration in the case that, like, there's a disagreement or dissolving of the company, whatever. But if you have to define and code all those things, and you want them really automated, and it's not just, like, the if part of the function is, like, somebody is pissed off, but it's something that's not highly subjective, we have to objectify, in a sense, make objective the rules of our relationship in advance, which is a very uncomfortable thing to do. Like, what if you and I were going to say, like, okay, like, you and I are going to go to a bar, and then, like, there's going to be a person we're both attracted to, and what are we going to do? And, like, we have to sit down and code into rules what that is. Like, that's strange. That's not human behavior. That's computer behavior. And so it's
what contracts do, though. I mean, that's the whole purpose of a contract.
It's what they try to do, but the difference is in a contract, like, yeah, it's on paper, but, like, in practice in business, if you like and trust a person, that's, like, just when shit goes wrong. But, like, we don't follow to the letter every provision of enforcing rules. Like, we have clients that says pay us on this date, and they pay us a little bit later. We don't go sue them, right? And so it allows for some flexibility.
It's a shame. I know a good lawyer.
Yeah, I don't know one. But... so there's a human subjectivity that intermediates the legal paper contract, but when you are trying to put it into code, it's a little less flexible. Or another interesting question is, how do you re-inject that subjectivity into smart contracts? But then I don't know really what you're achieving by doing all this work.
It's true. Right now we're 5 to 10 years out from all sorts of things. I think my guess is it takes about 5 more years to at least build out the varying blocks that you're going to need to have things running on blockchain, right? Maybe that's a decade. I don't know.
Well, yeah. I mean, just a definitional question of what you think, like, what does it mean when we're there? But it's not going to be like, it's not binary, it's incremental progress. But in 5 years, you think there'll be significant adoption or really mass use or something?
That's my guess. I mean, what do I know? I mean, you're the guy that could say that much better. But there's going to be a period of time, and really, I guess the point that I was making, without having any real basis to make it, is just that we're building, right? We're building all of the things that we're going to need to have blockchain adoption kind of everywhere, right? Right now, you hear there's a lot of people who are talking about digital securities, right? We said we think that ICOs will be unregistered securities offerings, right? We said that back, we put out a paper, the folks that I work with, saying that we thought that was the case, and we weren't very popular. And then all of a sudden, the Dow report came out, and then people were like, okay, maybe these guys understand it. But that just brings up that we're in the building phase right now. People thought that there were all these other things that could happen. There was a utility token, and then there wasn't a utility token because the February 2018 statement about how I haven't seen any ICO that isn't a security, right? And then there was Hester Pierce's statement that maybe there could be a utility token if you develop it this way, and that was February of 2019.
Right.
So everything is being built right now. Everything from the regulators' opinions on things, like the concept that they threw in of decentralization, and I think that that's causing a lot of people some difficulty. What decentralization really means?
Yeah, the whole when they labeled ETH a utility token because of its widespread use, it's sufficiently decentralized. Is that what you're referring to?
Right. Yeah. Well, they didn't call it a utility token. They said that it wasn't a security. Right?
Okay. Interesting.
So but now I haven't read the full statement, but I read portions of it, and it looked like Hester Pierce was saying.
Yeah, we just tweeted that.
Utility tokens. I saw your tweet on it.
We just tweeted about.
You had a whole series of tweets on that, right?
Well, we had a four tweet series. Big. It was an opus.
It was good, by the way.
But it was just
tweet opus.
Right. It was just a quote from Hester Pierce saying, these are securities. That they follow securities laws, they're compliant, and that's what we've been telling people for a long time. It's like, that just seems a priori logical. Like if you follow the law, you're legal, But it's nice we get that question all the time, how do you know, isn't this gray? And so it's nice to just have at least a quote. I mean, there's still some murky regulatory uncertainty around the wider cryptocurrency blockchain world, but I think at least in this space of the securities, it's actually easier in some ways that it's regulated because there's no rules for how to behave.
Exactly.
So
the building blocks are being built right now, and you could see it from I would say July of 2017 up until February 2019. You can see these various building blocks being built, and I know from talking to guys like you that the other building blocks, the technological blocks, are being built as well. So my understanding is that did you guys build your own blockchain related technology?
We've built a few things. So one is we to date have built a standard or a set of rules on top of and embedded within the standard ERC-26 functions. Mm-hmm. And so basically we've added a few extra features that allow for you to behave compliantly. So these are having a whitelist of known people that can interact or trade a token in any form. So if you haven't gone through accreditation and AML KYC, then we don't let you onto a whitelist to trade a token, and that way it's only being held by accredited AML KYC people. The whitelist itself can be modified to do anything. It could be, we only want left-handed people named Roger, and that could be the rule, whatever the rule, but it allows for you to moderate rules or what we call the regulator function. So on top of that, we have a separate set of smart contracts that allow for you to upgrade and replace those rules. So if the SEC changes the rules and says, okay, if now it's right-handed people named Tom, we can change the rules, replace the old set, and then remain in compliance and adapt to whatever happens.
They're always doing that. These Toms. They favor right-handed people named Tom.
As a left-hander, it's tough.
It's wrong.
And then we allow essentially if there's some kind of fraud that occurs or a token goes somewhere it's not supposed to, in the sense that somebody steals it, well, we would still know the identity of the person under legal. We have the ability to take the tokens, move them back, and so in a certain sense, it's not truly decentralized. But if the SEC tells me I need to go do something, I can't just be we don't have any choice. I think there are other solutions that could work better than that, and I think it's not, it doesn't really hold that close to the ethos or original intention of Bitcoin, but also is in touch with the reality of how business and securities work.
Right. Well, you're talking about the difference between a public blockchain and a private blockchain, and all of these bespoke solutions that you're seeing that any financial institution, and you guys are in a regulated space, so you're going to have similar...
Yeah, and regulated ourselves.
Exactly. So you've got that regulation. You can't have a public blockchain where I can go ahead and put a PDF of a report that I wrote on the blockchain. You're going to have rights. You're going to have and you're going to need administrative rights because it's a private blockchain, right? That's what Swift is going to do.
Sure. So, to date, we have issued our securities onto a public blockchain, onto the Ethereum blockchain. Mm-hmm. But essentially, these features I'm talking about is what a private blockchain adds. And so it's essentially it's run on the Ethereum blockchain. You can see, this wallet traded to this wallet X amount of tokens. But behind the scenes, we know the identity of every wallet, and we can take certain actions that a regular ERC20 standard 6-function token wouldn't be able to take.
Okay, so how do you do that?
Well, it's the things I just talked about, is like having a whitelist of who can open a wallet so that, even though it appears in ERC20 on the Ethereum blockchain, it's our little universe of people, it can't go to any ERC20 compliant wallet.
So let's step back for 1 second. Why don't you just let everyone know what a wallet is for the uninitiated?
Essentially, it's a bank account. It's an account that can hold tokens or value on this blockchain. It's really, I think conceptually, you're talking about nodes and data moving through nodes essentially. So I'd say you can think of a wallet as one. This is probably more confusing, right? So it's like one dot in a network, and then it can hold things inside that vessel, whatever. And you can think of it as a bank account, a wallet, or
an address, right? Is it like I'm not a computers guy. I don't do computers.
I don't do them.
But so I have to break stuff down really simply. So the way that I view a wallet is it's like a public mailbox that nobody can ever open.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a private mailbox, but nobody can ever open it except for the person that has the key to that mailbox.
Right.
And then maybe you can give someone else a key, right? But you cannot open it up unless you have the key, whoever that is.
Yes. Well, so
a wallet...
It's really, there's a number of metaphors going on. I think that's one accurate way to think about it, is that you're hinging upon the address, nomenclature of everyone has an address, which is just a set of numbers and letters that say where something goes and doesn't go within the network. But you could think about it it's 123 Broadway Avenue. And then, it's an address, and you could think about it as an analogy of mailboxes and delivering mail. I think another quasi or semi-true analogy is bank accounts and moving money around, though it can move things other than money. Another one is probably thinking about wallets and cash inside a wallet, a lock and key. I think there's a lot of linguistic confusion and lack of cohesion around some of that makes it very difficult to talk about. But in short, yes, it's a place that securely holds something
that nobody else can take from you.
In most cases, yes.
Unless there's a 51% attack, right? Which we could talk about in a second.
Well, so that's what I'm saying is our token standard, actually but through a multi-sig wallet, multiple parties have to agree, and the government needs to take action for us to do this, but a company, along with the agreement of other parties, could take tokens out of your wallet. So, I need the ability, if the SEC says you need to take this money back, to do it. And so we call it a forced transfer function, but that's what it does.
Okay, so does that also mean that the only way that you can trade a digital security would be by registering the wallet? And do you have to register each wallet? If I want to, if I move it to my wallet A, and then I'm a bad guy, right? So somehow I got some guy's stuff, right? And I move it from my wallet A to my wallet B somewhere else. Do I have to register that wallet B with you in order to move it? Is that kind of how it works?
Broadly, yes.
For a dumb guy
and not just register it. You'd have to submit your ID, your social security number, show you're an accredited person. And so when you steal and move it to wallet A, we know Jason did something. We know that Jason touched it. And even if it ends up 6 places down the trading line, we can audit the entire thing, and we know the identities of everybody along the way.
Gotcha.
And so then it's like, oh, Jason A traded to Jason B. First of all, we wouldn't register two wallets to the same person. The only reason it's not fully true is because we integrate with secondary markets for trading.
Okay.
Well-known ATSs are like Templum, T0, Open Finance, and so we work with some of those groups, and they don't want, say they have a trade over there, they don't need to go to Atomic Capital's software to go online and create an account with us when they're already on T0 or wherever. And so instead, what these groups are doing is integrating whitelists, basically making sure that your compliance of your ATS or your secondary market and my compliance system both seem to check out, so that we're comfortable blending whitelists.
Oh, that's what's going on there in the background. Huh?
Essentially, yeah.
That's fascinating. So everyone has kind of their own whitelist, right? Like, these are my guys that I know are accredited investors that are not on the OFAC terrorism list, right? That meet all the criteria that you need, and then you cross-reference them, the secondary.
Any group that we're like integrating our token standard with, like, they basically what you're doing is making integrating the actual like names and actual like ability for the tokens to move around. They're all using Ethereum blockchain. So like, they just anything that could take a Ethereum token could take these tokens. When you add additional functionality to an ERC20, it still can fit into any ERC20 wallet. We're adding extra rules that restrict it to a fewer set of wallets, but it's not like you have to invent something new to like accept these. The deeper real integration is how, any kind of variance in our code from other token standards, whatever, but really it's like I'm taking, and we're a bit different than some other like issuance platforms in that we also are regulated, FINRA license, all this, and so, we're taking legal risk. If like the ATS screws up or they're doing fraud, then like suddenly we have a bunch of fraudulent terrorists on our whitelist trading a token that we issued, and we have some connection to that, or it's at least from a brand perspective not a great look. And in the same way, like if Open Finance takes on our things and we didn't do a good job doing accreditation on a bunch of people, now they're facilitating the trading for non-accredited people to trade this stuff. So you have to be comfortable with the way this is coming in from both sides.
Gotcha. Now, you said a couple of really interesting things that I kind of wanted to talk about. When you said a token standard, what does that mean? Because you hear people talk about that, but I'd like to hear from one of the innovators what token standards are.
I think again, it sounds like something like maybe I'm so out of touch, but it probably sounds like like a big deal, like super deep or something. It's just saying there's a set of rules. You're like, no, not at all.
No, but it doesn't sound super deep.
Or like
but
technical or something.
It sounds like there's other stuff that people are talking about, and one of the things I want people to do is to be able to learn from these conversations.
Yeah.
So when people talk about a token standard,
right?
Tell me about what that stuff encompasses.
Let's just aggregate the word token from standard.
Disintermediate.
Whatever. One of them. Something.
Right.
So it's really just a standard, which says like the same way that we have the word. It's just another language, but it's a set of rules for how that language works that everyone agrees on. And so, the same way, I used to work in telecom, like what happens is the GSMA, the GSM Association, which is an association of all the large telecom operators, brings everybody together, and they say, okay, we're going to do 5G, which is basically just a set of rules so that all the different systems, all these companies can work together, which is the only way that phone service is valuable, right?
Okay.
And so, that approach of aggregating an association, seem very aggregation heavy today. Bringing together a bunch of people to agree on the rules and then implement those rules is very organized. What we're looking at with blockchain is the same idea, that there needs to be a common set of rules for my code to work with your code. So in the case of ERC20, there are 6 functions that everybody uses, and if you use these 6 functions, the code will talk to each other, wallets will be able to accept it. There's 2 optional functions as well, that one is to name it and one is to decide how many decimal points you can fractionalize a token into.
So what are the 6 that everyone has to have?
There's, I hope I can remember off the top of my head. There's transfer to, transfer from.
You can use your phone if you need to.
Okay. Like account balance. I'm blanking right now. I should use these off the top of my head. But basically...
Well, even that's just interesting to know. I never looked into the technical details about this stuff, so it's pretty fascinating.
Anyway,
So there's all there are these things that you have to have, and then there's two optional things that you can add.
Well, you have to have them if you want your thing to be able to talk to the other thing, so they're both speaking the same language. And like, imagine it's like, a key in a lock. Like if your key is some kind of crazy monster made out of Play-Doh, it's not going to fit into the lock. And so it's just saying, here's the way the locks work, and here's the way the keys work. This might be a mixed metaphor because of private keys, but just the way that everything connect. And so everyone, if they use that, something becomes much more useful. Everyone's using their own set of rules. None of it fits together. It doesn't matter.
To talk to each other, right?
And this is a technology that it's a network technology. It only works at network scale, or it only has value,
So tell me this.
Is this clarifying or confusing?
No, I think it's clear. What strikes me, maybe what you saw was a look on my face. What strikes me is how, when you talk about these things, it becomes very apparent that the entire fintech industry that really runs on blockchain, why people like to use white papers instead of offering memorandums, right? Because it's geeky. I mean, it's technical. It's detailed. You really have to understand what's going on. You need to understand the background and how to make two different systems or networks work. You have to. There's some basic computer science theory behind it.
Well, no,
go ahead.
I mean, this goes back to what I was saying about like trying to codify human relationships into code. Like if you read some of the legitimate white papers, or the like.
Wait, there's not legitimate white papers?
Like the Bitcoin white paper, like. There's some of this language stuff, maybe Bitcoin white paper. Some of these white papers are legitimate, and actually, it's like the core idea are they're not super complicated things, but it's like you need to be so thorough in describing exactly what you're talking about and the exact set of rules, because somebody else has to make it exactly the same. Otherwise, none of it works. It's like it won't compile. You know what I mean? Right.
So, it does not compute.
It does not compute, and so.
That was bad. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. So. I mean, basically, I think that it seems like, I think it's one of the issues with the industry is it seems like this heavy, like, scary thing because of the thoroughness and detail of it, but, like, the core concepts I don't think are really that complicated. It's just what's required to actually make it work that require a lot of writing and, like, diagrams and, all this stuff.
Merkle trees.
You're good.
When I read Satoshi's paper, I was like, what the hell is a Merkle tree?
Yeah.
I skipped that part. I mean, I saw it, but I was like, there's a couple of dots and they're connecting, and I don't really get it. So, did you look into this? Was it Zcash or Z something where there was some sort of software that potentially allowed duplication of... It was
like a
some
double
Z
spend?
thing. Was it?
Well, it was recently edited, is that right? Is this a recent thing?
Yeah, there were some announcements about it. Did you follow?
I remember seeing a headline that like they quietly patched some kind of double spend issue.
Right. Well,
I don't know the detail. I just saw the headline.
The way I saw it was that it wasn't double spend. It allowed people to duplicate or essentially print more money. So it didn't take people's money, but it potentially had the exploiters able to create a lot of it. I don't know what they did, but it just goes to the geekiness of the stuff and the DAO hack. If you don't have the programming right, you can have a flaw in the system that can allow it to be exploited.
Yep.
And
that's also the other challenge with all this stuff is like, unlike regular code, if you get it wrong, like it's not, you don't own the code, it's public code, and so it's not like I just like, I want to change that thing that happened, like, in the... Unless
you're somebody whose initials are VB, then you
even
can
him,
do it,
like,
right?
It's not up to him, it's not like he has a lot of authority, but like, it's ultimately...
People will listen to him.
He will listen to him, but ultimately the miners, over 50%, have to adopt whatever rule changes, and that's why you have all these forks and all this, but the bottom line is like, it's not like you can get it wrong, or like even one minor mistake, and you could potentially, when you're talking about moving to the securities industry, it's like, $500 trillion of money in the world, or value, whatever that means. Like, you could have one little bug of code, and suddenly, like, you've tanked the entire global economy if when it gets to scale. And so it's just hard to really build any high-level complexity into this stuff. I think this is changing. I don't want to get too much into tech stuff, but I think there are other approaches with that are better.
Better than what?
Well, I mean, rather than having to write everything in Solidity code, the code for the Ethereum blockchain, you can write things in other languages like Java or Python, whatever, that then can all connect back into regular blockchains at the end of the day. And so, but there's a greater interoperability. But if it's written in Java, like off-chain, then I can edit it. I mean,
interoperability. That was that because people apparently really like talking about that now. That just means that the different blockchains can talk to each other.
Right. Well, so it's sort of the reverse of what we were talking about with standards, which is the other way to fix the problem of things not talking to each other is build bridges between them, make them interoperable. So, if this one's structured like this and this one's structured like this, it's getting weird. Some way to connect those so that the data or information or whatever it is can flow between the two. And then if you have 9 different systems, if you can tie those all together, just the way like our sewers work or whatever, like that eventually flows around the way you need to. But it's basically just duct tape shit together, but that's the way like our cities, that's the way our actual economic system works, is a bunch of things that were built sort of in a more localized vacuum or set of thinking, and then they're like, all right, wait, we didn't think about, we might have to trade money with Japan, and now we have to connect the two and have, all this stuff.
It strikes me that that's going to have to happen because you have all of these different blockchain technologies that people are building, and you've got Hyperledger and Corda is another one, and R3 is using one, and I don't know, pick another conglomerate or group of entities that are using another. It shouldn't be that only one wins. It's not like the Thunderdome, right? Where 2 men enter, 1 man win, right? Many men enter and all men win. I mean, that's the idea. How far along are we from that? Do you think that there are ways to allow these different blockchain codes to talk to each other? Is it an easy patch? Is it not? We have ones and zeros. We went from ones and zeros with Turing in the 1930s and really probably the 40s, right? To now, where I have my cell phone and it's more powerful than the computer is the size of a building. Yeah. Well, that got us into space, exactly.
Yeah. Well, so I mean,
it strikes me as someone who has no knowledge whatsoever. It strikes me as something that is inevitable, but I have no knowledge, so
Well, it's not like this is the first time. Like when the internet was getting started, it wasn't like, oh, the internet was here. There were these little clusters of universities, DARPA, like all kind of tinkering away, and then kind of like think about like hunters and gatherers, and there was this tribes, then city-states, then nations, and now we have a global system. And so in the same way, you have to see these like spreading networks, and they meet each other, and then they figure out how to like keep that going, and then you can scale networks of networks essentially. And I bet if you mapped it over time, what it looks like is called like colonies or certain groups killing others and taking over their network, and then they spread, and then there's a few large tribes, essentially, or a few large nations. And so you end up with a few set of standards that just by adoption take over because there's no benefit to having 30. Like there's nothing that, unlikely you need 30 different standards. You can probably figure out, most 3 to 5, and that could cover what the 30 you're trying to get at. And then you have concentrated resources, concentrated money, concentrated focus of developers, so that those things can actually do all the things everyone else is writing bullshit white papers about. So it's a question of, I think what's interesting is when you compare the case of telecom standardization to blockchain standardization, there's no telecom is a centralized system. It's expensive to make. It's given out by governments to have the license for spectrum. Nobody's in charge. There's no one who owns blockchain. There's different associations, the Wall Street Association. That's not a good example, but ones that are trying to speak on behalf of the industry. But they're also small little tribes that are pretending to be important and are also just trying to get survival and adoption of their think tanks or whatever. The point being that there's no Congress that where everybody meets up and says, okay, why don't we all do it this way and we'll agree on it. And part of the reason that is because I can monetize the protocol of an ICO. And so I want to use mine because I make more money if everyone adopts my Ethereum token or everyone adopts my Stellar token. The value of it grows. Whereas with GSM standards, nobody's monetizing directly the standard. They're monetizing the things you can do with it. The same with HTTP, all the internet standards, they're not monetized. What's monetized is Facebook and things that sit on top of it. But so what you end up getting is nobody wants to agree on the standards because everyone has their own personal financial interest and just the nature of like the culture and the decentralization of it. But it's really more a social question than it is anything to do with technology. Does that make sense, any of that?
It does, but I want to kind of tie it together because GSM does work.
Right.
LTE, which is I have on my... I used to have GSM, now it's LTE. I don't know the difference between all that stuff. But there are all these different entities that work. Like countries, I call my cell phone, and I mean, I call someone in another country on my cell phone, and hey, you know, I could talk to them.
Right.
And did these countries agree to put it together, or did they make...
Well, it's a private agreement, right? It's between private corporations. So Sprint and Telefonica and Verizon, they agree that they're going to all use 5G. 5G. It's not a national thing. The nations decide who in their countries, which businesses operate. But globally, when we talk about 4G, it's the same code, the same thing runs for everybody.
Gotcha.
And so
people are agreeing.
Well, in the case of telecom, they literally come together and they say, okay, we're going to make 5G now. And these different companies that already have the power and the interest come together and say, this is what 5G should be. And they realize that if they don't agree on that, the whole thing doesn't work because it's a network technology, telephony. So
it's telephony, not telephony?
Telecom. I say telephony, no?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would call it telephony, but I guess it's not really a good pronunciation.
It would make you a telephony.
Exactly.
And so we don't have that same kind of organization level, or centralization is another way to think of it, in the blockchain world. And so you end up with a bunch of like shit show small initiatives that can't agree on anything, so they never can get to the point of realizing the actual things this could do because you don't have the thing talking globally yet, you know?
Gotcha. But it does seem that that's ultimately there will be groups of people that will say, okay, we've got all of this over here, and we've got all this over here. Maybe we should kind of agree to some standardization. Do you think that ever happens, or do you think that the decentralized, hardcore, libertarian, not to stigmatize libertarians, but independent people who don't want to be told what to do, don't want to rule anyone, do they just rule the day and make it impossible?
So it has, ERC-20 is a standard, right? And so that, I don't know what currently is, but like a year ago, it was like 93% of tokens were being issued this way.
Yeah,
so almost everybody agreed, right?
Right.
And so how did that happen? It was because it was started by someone who had deep ties into the community. People believed in him. He took a thorough process to get like everyone to buy into it, and then people started using it, and it worked.
Right.
And that was for a minor thing, but I mean, not minor in the sense that I'm saying it's a very simple set of these 6 functions, of which I can't remember all. It's not like super complex code. It's like a few lines of code. And so, but everyone agreed on it to it. And so it's happened in the blockchain world to some degree, though, like if Ethereum, continues to go bust, like it's not necessarily written in stone, it's going to remain that way. Nevertheless, it's happened. There's been, across this industry, like people adopting the same thing. But I think it's more of a social question of like people believed in the person and the way that it was done more so. But I guess to answer the other question, I think the way that it happens on an enterprise or highly scaled level is not people like the big groups all get together and like say, okay, like we should all standardize. It's like it gets to a point where there's concentration of power such that it is just the standard. Like if 90% of people, I don't know, if a third of the world uses one service for something, like suddenly there's secondary effects. Like developers have reason to build businesses on top of it because they believe it's going to be around. But I think ultimately it's a function of belief.
Let's call it the Amazon effect.
The Amazon effect, sure, exactly. Right. So like I'm not gonna. Yeah, I think you get it. But
yeah, no, I do. But and it makes sense. Ultimately, if you want to do anything with a whole bunch of people, there's a base level of cooperation. Right? Look at. You mentioned UFC before we started, right? That is, the ultimate in. Some would say it's the ultimate in people fighting, but they're not. It's not really. There's a ton of rules that they're agreeing. There's no eye gouging, right? There's no biting. They wear cups, right? Under UFC rules, you can ground and pound, but they're thinking about...
These are the standards of the sport.
Exactly, but they're thinking about outlawing low kicks because you can, you can really end someone's career that way. If you're doing... There's plenty of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments where they won't allow you to do neck cranks, right? Because the neck cranks, it's terrible, right?
I'm a crank specialist. So.
Right, but the reason why is because if you take the neck crank too far, you'll kill someone. I mean, that's like the old karate movie where they go like this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what a neck crank is, right?
There's karate something other than that.
Yeah, I know, right? The old kung fu movies. I mean, so even in a situation where you're fighting,
seeming chaos, right? But there's actually a set of rules,
like serious rules,
right? And like and then everybody globally, right? Like they know how to train and they know how to practice because they know the rules. Like don't kick someone when I think like both their hands are down is a rule, right?
Yeah, you can't do soccer ball kicks to the head in UFC.
Correct, not yet. I'm lobbying for it, but right. And so like I know how to practice. I know how to make myself ready for that set of rules. Mm-hmm. If it was just like, hey, get in a ring until someone dies, like. I mean, that would be actually a set of rules. There's no rules except you keep going till you die. But that's actually a rule.
They used to have that in the South, by the way.
In the South?
Yeah, they were like
Georgia? Some of the United States.
The antebellum South.
Really?
Like it was a remnant of...
that's got to be a slave kind of history, no?
No, it's not. It's a remnant of the culture from the British, the northern British Isles in the 1600s. And it was like there were two rules. And one was essentially no-holds-bar fighting. And the other was fighting with rules.
Right.
And when Southerners would fight, they would maim each other. They would there's some terrible sounding stuff. Ugh. It's in Thomas Sowell's book, Black Rednecks, White Liberals. It's and he talks about it where it comes from the British Isles. Huh. But that was a style of fighting. Like you could choose the no rules fighting, and you would die horribly. But so one person always died horribly in those fights. Mm. So there are no rule fights.
But I mean, but my point is to say that is in and of itself a standard and a rule. The rule is you go till you die. That's actually a rule. And so I know how to prepare for that. If I know it's not to the death and I can't poke people in the eye, I'm going to train and practice differently. In the same way, if I know like these are the standards to build my code, I'm going to build it in a certain way that complies with that. Otherwise, it's useless and I've wasted my time. And so. There's just
who would have thought that UFC and ERC20 tokens
they're almost exactly the same.
Had so much in common.
Yeah.
All right, so let me see. You guys recently had some news. You were featured in Bloomberg. You being atomic. That's right. And a couple of other publications. You want to talk about that?
Well, so we announced we're working with a publicly traded company, the first ever public company. So T0 has issued a token, and they're owned by a public company, Overstock.com. This company directly issued a token for a private placement, but wasn't like one step removed as a subsidiary necessarily. Does that make sense? No?
I'm not following that part.
Like, I think the first ever public company, in a sense, to issue a security token is T0.
Okay.
But T0 is owned by a public company, but actually is its own subsidiary, right?
Right, that's true.
So what I'm saying is this company, it's not an important, really, differentiation, but is the first public company to actually be the company directly that was public, issuing the token brand-wise or, on a legal level.
And they're using the Atomic platform.
And they're using our software, and then we're also fundraising on their behalf.
That's excellent stuff. I mean, you've done a lot since 2017, and you've managed to do it right, to your credit.
Yeah, I mean, Atomic Capital was built in July 2018, and since then we built our own software. We did our own security token offering on our platform, raised $3.5 million. We've set up a VC fund that has a decent amount of money already committed to it, and we have a number of clients, including, a publicly traded company in like 6 or 7 months, so not too bad.
I think that's phenomenal. It takes people years to do that.
We've also gone through figuring out how to have broker-dealer coverage and getting FINRA licenses and all that stuff.
Right, which is another really important thing if you want to operate in the space. So now you've done a lot in, what is that, July 2018? So it's 7-8 months, right?
Yep.
How did you manage to do all that? To me, that's just a phenomenal amount of work.
Mostly cocaine, yeah. I'm just kidding. It's, from day one, we already had like seed funding into exactly what we wanted to do. At least the initial first steps to get to like do our own security token. So that was a clear pathway for like 4 months. Mm-hmm. But leading into that, I had been running a consulting group in blockchain space, working for Fortune 500's World Economic Forum setting up proof of concept software projects. And so I'd already built a team essentially of people that we've worked together for a while, and so we just kind of transitioned that team into a specific software and fundraising business instead of just being consultants. But I think just because of the clear direction, we from day one had a head start and a pretty gelled team, and then I don't know, it's a good blend of I just think we actually know what we're doing, and I think we've kept really high priority on what actually matters today. And I think also some of our other groups doing similar stuff are very well funded. They've raised $20 million or whatever, large amounts of money. I think because we've still raised a decent amount of money, but it's not like we had money for the next 10 years regardless of making a sale.
Right. You don't have 4 years of capital that you're sitting on from a fundraise.
Yep. And so our approach has been, I think, much more grounded and practical. And then the fact that we do the investment banking broker-dealer side also allows for, you're on the front lines of saying okay, we have to go sell this shit for real. We're not just charging a fee for you to use our software. If we don't sell it, it hurts our brand and is a waste of our time. And so I think just that direct contact with where the market's really at, I just have I read stuff from well-known people, I'm just that's not true. Or I think we've just become very confident in what we are seeing and believing because A, it's working, and B, there's just so much noise that's a step or two away. That's thought leadership, but it's we actually have to go make the software. We actually have to go sell the token. And so it's just a really different mindset. And I think we've just been very focused on how do you stay in business. And now we're getting to a point where we don't have to worry about next month, but still taking, I think, that very practical approach to stuff.
So how many people did you start with? How many people did you have? Where do you see the growth coming in the next year? Is it certain segments? Is it certain types of companies? Where do you see it going, the market going in the next 5 years? I'd be curious to hear that stuff.
5 years, I have no idea.
Okay.
I mean, big.
Fair point.
Good. In the short term, when we started, I think there were, officially, within the first month or two, 4 or 5 people. Now we're at 12. And really, it's hard to hire. I wish we're hiring for multiple roles right now, but it's hard to find people that aren't going to take 6 months just to orient,
Right.
Because no one went to very, very few people are just going out of college now studied blockchain in college.
Right. I think NYU just came out with a blockchain major. I saw some, and I just kind of chuckled.
Yep.
It's hearing about blockchain in the elevator terminals. It's okay, all right, it's fully, it's mainstream now.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I got a booger going on. So
okay, we'll make sure the camera isn't on you here. I'll focus on me as I talk. And now another note from our sponsor.
Boogers. Coming to a nose near you.
Hey, we're not that kind of podcast. We don't have boogers sponsored.
Okay, for the kids.
That's right. Actually, booger is a word that's okay to say.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's really tough to draw that line. I think it's kind of like a gateway drug. Boogers, next thing's the F word.
It's very close, but there's a product called Boogie Wipes, which, maybe one day you'll find, and that's what people use to actually clean the snot from the kids' noses. It's like a saline solution, wrap towel, and
we're living different lives.
Yeah, we are, man. It's totally different. Anyway, it's a thing now. People just talk about it. One day you'll be in the suburbs, well, if you want, and then you'll have kids, and you'll have Boogie Wipes. It'll be wonderful.
Yeah, and as long as I don't commit suicide.
That's right. That's right.
So, just joking. So, what were we just talking about?
Well, before we hit to the boogers, where do you see the market going?
Boogers, it's hard to hire people. We have a number of other public companies that we're actively talking to or, in some cases already working directly with officially that aren't publicly known. We're focused on really just 3 verticals. We don't focus on real estate or debt in general. I think it's a waste of time right now, which is,
Why is that?
So we're brokering deals, right? It has to make sense for the investor and the issuer. Mm-hmm. So from that mindset, and you have to realize all this stuff's to the vast majority of the world experimental technology, and so when you're selling real estate, it's the best you can do is it goes up 10%, or you get some debt on it, right? Debt service 10-20%. there's existing...
And real estate, I would say, is unlikely to increase 10% unless you're in certain markets, because we're at the top of a 9 or 10-year cycle.
Yep.
Right, so people are expecting in the next year that real estate's going to be a downturn. I don't know if that's true.
But regardless of it, even when
you're
up 20, if you're doing 20% on real estate or 30, like, those are great returns in the regular financial world. Why wouldn't you can go get them in the regular financial world if you weren't willing to take enough risk? And you can buy REITs. There's already liquid real estate products.
Right.
Why am I going to go to do this whole new crazy thing unless there's some deep, like, I understand why you would sell it, because they're like, oh, I can like sell people real estate overpriced at a retail price for, you know, corporate or institutional real estate. Makes sense for the seller in a lot of cases. Who's buying that? I think the deals we've seen to date are prearranged for the most part, or haven't been successful. We get real estate deals all the time because, like, yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I can sell my real estate for more money by chopping into smaller pieces.
Well, I mean, I would agree with that.
Okay.
Because I don't think that by quote unquote tokenizing it, which you're not really tokenizing it, but by selling, let's call it digital securities and real estate, you can cut it up more and make more money. I think that it's just
you don't think that's what happened with the St. Regis deal? That's not their motivation, partially.
No, because from what I read, it was mostly an insider deal. Like, they sold to people that they already had institutional relationships
exactly.
with.
So it was already prearranged.
Right, but what that
sorry.
No, I agree with you. I don't look. I think that the real estate market is different from the securities market, because people will go and buy securities. They'll invest in the company. People don't go and buy interest in a building, and there are reasons for that, because it's clubbier, because you're looking at larger influxes of capital. But to your point, I think it underlies the issue with tokenization, which is that if you're selling a security, more people are used to owning stock in a company, and it's a digital security. But a lot of the investors that invest in real estate, it's not mom and pops, it's not even a Reg D. It's, I have a building, I've got an opportunity to buy it, I'm going to put in $2 million, I'm going to get, I'm going to get a loan with an LTV of 50%, and I'm looking for the remainder. So I'm going to look to all my friends that are going to put in $2 million or $5 million, and they'll have the money, and it's going to be owned and operated by me. I'm running the project. It's very personal. It's very relationship driven, and that's how real estate. Because that's my world. I come from a lot of. I've dealt with real estate a lot.
Exactly.
And you see it. You see it in loans that I've foreclosed. You see it in the CMBS world. It's, there's a couple of people that will make the loan, and maybe they'll team up, maybe they won't, and then there's a couple of people that invest, and all these guys know each other, so it's very personal. Right. Whereas the securities world that you're talking about is less personal. You can look at
the whole idea is you're like globally selling a building or whatever.
Right. Yes.
But like, who's buying? I just don't know who's buying it. And like, either you're on the, people. It's the same with art. Like, some people are buying art as an investment vehicle, and they don't really want to like have it in their house. And then most people are buying, or other people are buying art because they want the art in their house. Right. Same with real estate. Like, I'm either buying it to live in it or as a giant like investment, right?
Right.
For the most part, and just I don't know why you can do all the same. You can get almost all the same benefits, if not more, from traditional real estate investing without all this crazy experimentation. I think it'll get to a point where I just think it's there yet. And then it's not, blockchain or digital securities aren't trusted for institutions at a point where institutions, might make sense for institutions, but institutions are not really here yet either. Yeah,
the markets are developing. I think that's really, it's kind of like the building blocks, right?
Sure.
Right now you have smart fridges, right? The smart fridges, they run on it's the Internet of Things, so it's cell phone technology that's been developed, right? And that'll tell you what you need more milk in your fridge, right? Your blender tells you when there's a part that's broken. So there was a ton of building blocks. I mean, from like the 50s until today that got us there.
Right.
And so...
But so like, I agree with all that. I think it will happen. It's... Again, we have to sell the stuff, and so like I just don't think it's happening today.
You don't think the market's there for it, right?
I don't think so, and I don't think the benefit of to mix terms, like the utility of doing it in this form has outstripped that exceedingly enough to make you change behaviorally to this new thing.
Right. And
when you're buying any kind of debt or anything that doesn't have the potential for exponential returns,
right,
which are equity products, I just don't think.
Okay, so you're looking. Right. The point is that it's an
The best you could
investment
do
for
is like, I'm going to get like
exponential
8%. Like, why wouldn't I just go get 8% on like a regular real estate investment? But like for equity, private growth stage equity, that's like the right profile of investor to take the tech risk, right? Because they're already taking experimental or risky bets as a VC type investment to begin with.
It's an interesting point. I never thought about it that way, but I think you have a good point about that.
Thank you. Me too.
Well, you're doing it, right? I mean, you're actually in there innovating.
Yeah, and so like the risk profile and the opportunity of investing in growth stage equity or things like this Agenus deal, which provide VC type returns potentially if it's successful, when it's successful but not officially, are great enough, and the profile's right for people to try it. I mean, most people buying this, it's the first digital security they've ever bought, or the first token they've ever bought.
Right.
And like, it's not like, the software doesn't, like Coinbase feels really safe. Like someone would go on there, but for most companies, like you go on, it's like the company itself, the infrastructure, and all like startup-y, and so that's just kind of our philosophy. So we don't deal with real estate or debt. We're focused on life sciences, information technology, and physical infrastructure, equity investments into physical infrastructure.
Fascinating. So, well, I wish you the best. I want to keep talking to you, but I don't want to take up your time. I mean, I feel like we've covered a whole bunch of stuff already.
I don't know. Has
Do you
it
want
been
to
10
talk more
minutes?
about UFC? Actually, no, we're coming up on an hour and 30 minutes, so it's a good amount of time.
Okay.
You know what? I want to talk to you about one other thing, actually, if you don't mind, if you still have time.
Sure.
I want to talk to you about forking.
Forking.
Okay? Forking. So, you
emailed me a question in advance, so don't you want to talk
Oh, that's
about
right.
that?
Okay, we're going to talk about that too. Damn it.
I prepped for like 2 minutes on that.
I gave you homework on that. So first we'll talk about forks for a little bit.
Okay.
Because I want someone with your technological background to just explain that for people. And then after that, we'll end on the question that only my subscribers will hear, because it's a very special question. Right.
Oh my God.
I have one subscriber, by the way, and it's probably my dad. So, but let's talk about forks, because you've got these, call them conglomerates of people, let's call it miners, right? Whatever it is that will be mining a certain coin, let's say, right? They'll be doing the background maintenance of
Processing,
records.
Essentially, yeah.
Right, for processing transactions, let's say, and those guys are essentially the people that have stake in the network outside of the owners of the coins, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm using the words.
Sure. Roughly, they have an interest in the success of the network.
Right, and they're the ones that are maintaining the network for whatever reason. They're maintaining the network.
Sure.
So, why do forks happen? When do forks happen? Just a little bit of background about that. Is it just from rewriting code or needing to fix bugs? Tell us a little bit about that.
Why do divorces happen?
Okay.
No, I mean, really, I think answer the question and it'd be useful.
Couples grow apart, right?
They grow apart. I mean, what does that mean, though? Why would somebody grow apart?
Because I like riding a bike and my wife likes running, right?
Okay.
Or I like watching TV.
So different preferences.
That's all I want to do.
Yeah.
And my wife wants to travel.
Okay.
We both want to travel, by the way.
Right.
We don't have that issue, but that's just
Right.
some ridiculous example.
And what's the
right?
most common reason for divorce?
I have no
I think
idea.
money, right?
Is it?
I mean, like, when there's financial hard times, I think people get divorced
Yes.
more often.
Yeah. When things are not good, right, then a strained relationship will fall apart. Extra stress will kill a strained relationship.
Not yours, though, right?
We're good, man. We're good.
That's going to be fine. I'm trying to think. So those two, so there's a difference in preferences or beliefs or what you want to do. There's a financial issue. I guess another one is, it's sort of a subset of different preferences, but really, like, one person, like, becomes too amazing and the person can't keep up or something, right?
Okay.
I think this, what was her name? Who was dating that? That's not, anyway, so.
Julia Robertson, the cameraman.
Who was the guy, the super, Ariana Grande, right? She was, like, so good looking, you know?
Okay.
And she was dating this guy that, they got, like, I feel like he got, I don't know, I shouldn't even talk about it. He, like, got, like, he's had a hard time, I think, since then.
Okay.
He's a guy in SNL, and Pete Davidson.
Okay.
But he's, let's say, not as pretty as Ariana Grande.
Okay.
And they didn't stay together.
All right, okay.
But the point is to say that, like, sometimes somebody can be successful or outgrows the other person, which is a subset of different preferences or different life situations. But the point is to get back to forks. So, like, basically, I think you can probably break into those two groups. One is, if you fork, you can like make new money. Essentially, you're doubling the supply of something and saying, "Hey, everyone use this," and like save $100 in ETH, and then you create ETH Classic, which just I think had hacking issues also.
Yeah.
And now there's 100 of ETH Classic, and even if the ETH Classic is only 20% of the original, someone else has just captured like a whole new set of money. And at the a year ago, it was significant money and growing quickly.
Right.
And so one was to capture money and I think greed incentives, and the other, I mean, this is why like there's multiple versions of Bitcoin, BTC ABC, BTC SV,
Like BitGold or whatever it is, right?
all these different things is because of different beliefs of how the code itself should be developed. I don't think people necessarily realize like there's a Bitcoin foundation. Like there's still people very slowly tinkering and making changes, but it's just very deliberate. And then a group will say, hey, like, we think the block size needs to be bigger. Actually, this is what Satoshi in his white paper said should happen, that the block size should vary based upon demand in the network.
Okay.
That's why BTC SV, I believe, stands for Satoshi's vision.
Okay.
And so they think they've actually followed the real rules. So there's Bitcoin Cash, there's all this stuff, right? And so the difference is there are different implementations and variations on the original Bitcoin, 1.0 or 0.1 version that one increases block size, one rewards people differently, things like this that are variations. Then they can't get enough interest in the group for everybody to go the same direction, so they fork. And then because there's a financial opportunity in forking, if you get enough aggregated interest in a new set, like suddenly there's a bunch of money, and then there's miners have like an interest because if you're mining a certain one, or you own, like if I own $1 billion in Bitcoin, I don't want some new shit to become the like popular one because all my money is this thing, and have all my systems like literally warehouses of computers mining this stuff, and especially when you get to like ASICs. So there's like generalized compute, and then there's ASICs, which are application specific usages. They're created to mine a specific type of token, and so if you switch to some other kind of thing, it doesn't work as well or not at all. And so I've just put $100 million investment into this warehouse of computers mining this stuff. I have a financial interest in that being returned to me.
Gotcha.
So money and difference. Like,
is there a first mover
differences.
advantage when you fork, or not really, because it depends upon how it's coded?
Well, advantage. I mean, there's advantage in the sense that like probably the first fork of the first fork of Bitcoin is less dilution than the seventh fork of Bitcoin, right? And so there's an advantage in the sense that it's going to probably be able to retain more value than the ninth fork down the road. You know what I'm saying? Just like the ninth photocopy isn't as good as the second photocopy.
What about for the
Financially.
folks that start a new block? Like when you fork, my understanding of a fork is that
I guess
we go to this block, and then this block we're gonna use some sort of different coding or protocols, and therefore we're going to create something off of it. And so that first block,
it's not really accurate. It's more like they're copying the entire code base and starting on a new spot.
okay,
And then saying we're going to follow this path. I guess you could map it that way also, but it's more like they're just doubling, like mitosis. I think it is.
okay. So what they're doing when someone forks,
And it's like, so you have to like, if you're going on
group
GitHub,
forks, right?
if you're going on GitHub, like you can
Yes.
fork the code.
I've gone on and I've gone off. I can't follow anything on there.
So you can like, it's an option on GitHub. You can like fork code and work off the existing base of code, but then add your own without changing the original code set. That's what people are talking about.
So
it's
they're
forking
adding
the code.
rules.
Yeah. Well, it's like you're copying and pasting the code,
Right.
and then I can make edits with my group of people globally, whatever, onto the code. But the original code is the original code. I haven't modified that because I can't get enough people to agree to change, right?
Gotcha.
So I'm copying and pasting the code, and then say I'm going down this path with this code. Who's with me? And then some people go that way. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm trying to find. I want to understand the incentives behind it. So one
The first
incentive.
analogy you didn't get it to. It's really to make money at the end of the day, or
Right.
you believe ideologically that it's just better, and you're like an idealist.
So it's really money or ideology, and a group of people say, "Hey, I want to make more money," or a group of people say, "This is a better. This code is better because it fits."
Can scale more quickly, process transactions more quickly, shit like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
But then I think also, maybe the third layer is social, in the sense that sometimes people, there's like people that get a following, and then they're also getting socially reinforced, like they're important, they're like a sage or see something and are important, and so I think it's self-reinforcing that they need to do something new to maintain that social status.
The Svengali effect.
I think so, yes.
Right, okay.
Maybe. What's that? That's a reference to some movie, right?
No, the Svengali just means a leader.
But where does it come from, Svengali?
I don't even know.
Sounds like a country, right?
I thought it does. It sounds like a country in like Northern Europe somewhere, right?
But anyways, it's like someone's like starting a new kingdom, and like if people follow them and they have Twitter influence on this shit, it's hard to give that up, you know?
It's true. There's the cult of personality, essentially. Yeah. All right, so now let's go to the final question, all right?
Final showdown, lightning round.
Which is the best advice you've ever given or received. It could be either one or both.
So I thought about this question. I don't think I ever received this or given it, but I just like the answer.
Okay.
Which was that...
Works too.
Essentially, just that everyone's making shit up all the time, and like especially in this space, I think that recognizing everyone's like barely right behind like complete chaos and confusion, even if they can project authority well, gives me a lot of comfort in the sense that like, especially in this space, it's unwritten like what should happen. It's all subjective at the beginning of the day, and so I think if you're like work hard and you are working with integrity and you're somewhat competent in the space, like everyone's looking around like who knows the answer, and it's like it's being made up. There's not an objective answer, but I think just believe, like I guess it's like self-belief at the end of the day, but just understanding that like nobody really knows what they're doing and it's all made up to begin with.
I love it. That's great. It's words to live by. Believe in yourself, right? Believe in yourself.
It sounds better that way. I've heard that one before.
Yeah, but that's just, it's a minor part, right?
Don't defer to like people. Just I think like people that run this space, like no one, especially like the regulators, all these people, they don't actually understand the code. Like no one knows how to verify if that's, first of all, right or wrong. It doesn't even make sense, right? Like it's just something new. But secondarily, they don't know how to like even assess if that's the case. What I can assess is I'm looking at Jason. Jason looks like he has all the signs and symbols of somebody that looks professional and looks like he should have authority. Thus, I trust his authority by proxy.
It's totally fake, by the way. I only worked hard for that.
Well, yeah, I mean. Anyway, so I think people that couldn't play that role do better, and I think it's interesting. I remember taking this African anthropology class or history, an African class about Africa, talking about colonialism and decolonialism, and it talks about our first set of leaders that were African after post-colonialism were people that were educated in the colonial education system and learned the rules and tools and symbols of the white colonist, such that they could replicate and speak in their language, and the point to that they could take over authority, and it was recognized and understood essentially, and so they can manipulate the rules and tools and symbols of colonialist European ideal, ways of being,
mimicking authority essentially.
But my point is that the mimicking is what authority is essentially.
Right. Like when you're a kid, you think that all these adults know what they're doing, and then when you're an adult, you realize they don't really know.
Exactly. Like, oh my God, who was I raised by?
Exactly. All right. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Thank you for coming, Alex.
Thanks, man.
I hope that you come again. I'd love to have you on, and we did it. It's a minute and 1 hour and 39 minutes.
Long fucking minute. Okay.
Yeah, it is. So it was a good podcast. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, man.
Well, it's been 5 long years of this permanent midnight. I've been waiting for the sun to rise. I've been standing all alone by myself in this darkness. Man, I'm gonna lose my mind. And after 5 long years without any sunlight, I figured how to play this game. Forget about the moon, the stars, and the sunlight. You're gonna get to know my